Hi, my name is Karina Akidal. I'm the managing editor of Canadian Auto Dealer, and I'm here with Jeremy Anspach from PureCars. So Jeremy, I understand that the company recently released a study, an online survey in May, and it sort of looks at the importance of digital retailing and which aspects consumers are really leveraging a year into the pandemic. So jumping here, right in here, the study shows that digital retailing tools most frequently used are things like trade-in estimates at 71%, virtual test drive at 64%, contactless delivery options, at 61%. So those are big numbers. They're really interesting ones. I'm wondering if you can kind of dive in and give us a little more detail on why this is such a big thing and why dealers should care about this.
Sure. I think one thing I'll start off on is I think everything we're discussing will apply in the US the same way as it will in Canada. Consumers want answers to whatever is on their mind. And when a consumer has a vehicle and they're looking at a new vehicle, a trade is absolutely on their mind. And that's the value of that trade is definitely on their mind. And that's why you can see digital retailing tools most frequently used. The number one thing is trade-in estimates at 71%. I think something that came out of the data that was interesting is 64% of people want this kind of virtual test drive option. And if you look at 61% want a contactless delivery option. When you look at the disruptors like Carvana and Vroom, et cetera, they've really exploited that and they're serving the customers that are willing to stay there exclusively. Now for us, I think when you look at the complexity of a vehicle, it's only getting more and more complex. So having this contactless delivery option is great, but being backed by a bricks and mortar retailer is key, because what we find is more and more dealers are serving the customer post-sale very, very quickly because the customer has questions. If you look at a great retailer like Apple, they allow the shopper to do as much as they would like online, but they're allowing the customer to do as much as they would like in their bricks and mortar facility as well. And the better they blur that line, meaning if the consumer wants to do their research online and then physically go to the facility to actually transact, you can do that. In some cases, people go to the facility to learn, and then they go home, think about it, and the next morning transact online. I think this puts the franchise dealer in a really good spot because the current disruptors really only take those early adopters that are willing to do everything digitally. And what we learn from great companies like Apple is the connection between digital and the showroom has great synergy and benefit. And for those reasons, I think we'll see that although these digital retailing tools most frequently used have high percentages, where they are in the journey differs. And being a retailer with a physical presence will have value now and into the future.
Thanks, Jeremy. So that's a very good point. And what I'm curious to know here is that are there any other stats or surprising findings that sort of back up what you just said as well?
I think what we've seen is that during the pandemic, the percentage of website shoppers that were engaging a quote unquote seamless type digital retailing solution, those numbers have gone down. And we've seen those stats from multiple sources. They haven't gone away, but they've gone down. So what does that show? It shows the pandemic accelerated people's needs of focusing on this thought of we must focus online because that's our only option. And now that bricks and mortar has returned in this safe environment, we're seeing more balance. And I think that is here to stay. And depending on where the customer is in their cycle and where they are on the progressive curve of willing to take their second largest purchase and do it all online, it varies. But this is something that I think is critical. We look at most dealerships today, and we see that the price of the vehicle is really the number one dollar value, whether it's US or Canada. But you look at the F&I department, the vast majority of shoppers at a franchise dealer finance or lease. So we think flipping the script and allowing the customer to shop by payment early is definitely critical. And it's really the start of digital retailing. The customer needs to know if it fits their payment, then is interested in seeing how their trade-in value works, whether they're underwater or they have equity, which will ultimately further reduce their payment if they have positive equity. And for those reasons, I think that's an opportunity in the future for dealers to take more serious, which is, how do they allow you or I to shop by payment? How do we see a near penny perfect payment early versus showing me that in the checkout experience? Because since most shoppers have a payment on a vehicle, being able to show it early allows them to filter and think through which vehicle is actually a fit based on their payment needs earlier. And we believe that will increase their odds of having a full digital retailing experience later on.
So would you say that this would allow dealers to sort of get the upper hand on the Carvanas and the Vrooms of the world?
So as it relates to payment, I think the best dealers, whether they're disruptors or not, are absolutely allowing the consumer to see a payment early on. Soft credit pull options that give a near penny perfect payment are of high value, and they're highly used, and they generate a lot of activity. So I don't think that will be the upper hand. I think what it will do is it will take the dealers who are not doing those things and putting them on par with the best of the best disruptors and great franchise dealers that have mastered this. What I see most happening today and in the future is the retailers, auto or non-auto, that solve the customer's concerns or answer their likely questions early on in the process, engage them longer, win their trust quicker, and convert them at a higher rate. And dealers who take this approach, we see have an ultimate higher conversion rate and a lower ad cost per unit sold when they show all these things in tool form or how they communicate with their shopper earlier on in the process. It's a win-win. I've coined the phrase before, radical hospitality. That should be in the showroom, it should be on the phone, it should be on chat, and it should be for those who don't communicate but want to engage your website platform themselves. And having this penny perfect payment is definitely one way of doing that. A great trade-in tool that gives a real good band of payment range is also another thing.
So if we had to sort of wrap that all up in a nutshell, what advice would you give to dealers in Canada on really improving that experience? I mean, so we've talked about the trade-in and the virtual test drives. Maybe you can expand to other areas as well, like you said.
Sure. I think the best way of optimizing the business and solving blind spots is thinking about, what are your customers worried about? What are they thinking? And trying to solve those pain points early on in the process. So as the study shows, trade-in value matters. Why? Because if I'm buying a new car, my top 2 or 3 questions is, how much equity or how much water do I have in this vehicle? And that will directly influence when I'll buy my next vehicle and what I'll buy. That said, we see too many dealers have a trade-in tool. They think they check the box. The consumer goes and ultimately creates a lead for the dealer's CRM. Then the BDC rep follows up and says, hey, Jeremy, so I see you're interested in a vehicle. How can I be of assistance? What they really should be saying is, hey, I want to confirm this is the vehicle you're interested in trading, and I've spoken to our used car manager and he absolutely would like to see it. Or have some word track around the hot button of that shopper. Try to have a connection to what the consumer's concern was or what their ultimate objectives are versus a generic response. We see this within the best retailers out of auto. Auto is not excluded. They should be thinking this way. Payment, same thing. If you show a $289 lease special on your website, when that customer comes in, you shouldn't then show them a $440 payment for what they think is the same vehicle, because you lose trust. And for those reasons, I think it's absolutely critical. Just solve the pain points early. Think about all the blind spots that your dealership has, that by just giving the customer what they want online and matching it offline, you increase your odds of winning. And I think put the dealership in a position to really be the disruptor within what is currently called the disruptors. Franchise dealers are needed. They're here to stay. The consumer is very nervous from what we can tell when they're buying the second largest purchase they make. And we see with the complexity of vehicles, as I've mentioned before, being able to physically test drive a vehicle has value, not buying a vehicle that can be returned. For that reason alone, I think the franchise dealer has value in the car buying cycle. And secondly, taking delivery of a vehicle isn't simple anymore. It's not 1970 where this is where the key goes and here's the shifter. Cars are complicated. I've driven a car for a year without knowing all of its features as it relates to its electronics. I've heard that a F-150 pickup has more computing power than a Boeing 747. When you think about that, it shows its complexity in a massive way. And knowing that, it's critical for the consumer to feel confident in the vehicle they buy. And I think part of confidence comes from this genius bar type of environment, where if you're driving out and you realize your spouse's Bluetooth isn't paired and you don't know how, you go 2 miles down the road back to your dealership and they'll help you pair it. Dealers really should take advantage of this. And I'll say by doing so can combat what the industry calls the disruptors.